Hey, secret friends, welcome back to the Spotlight. This is, of course, our show where we chat with the folks that make the things that we love. And Peter and I are very excited to chat today with Star Trek and a lot of other stuff. Wonderful author named Dayton Ward. Good evening. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you guys doing?
We're doing
Doing
good.
pretty
We're
well.
doing good. Peter and I have both read your soon to be released novel, To Defy Fate. Peter finished it like 20 minutes ago. I am
Yeah.
halfway through, so we definitely have some non-spoiler related questions about that because we know the book comes out at the end of the month, and we don't want to yuck anybody's yum. But let's get the ball rolling with some simple origin story stuff. How did you get involved in the world of Star Trek?
Uh, I was bitten by another Star Trek writer. No,
Ouch.
no. So I've been a fan since I was a kid. I grew up watching the reruns of the original show. I did all of that, play with all the toys, built the models, read the oddball comic book, and whatever other books were infrequently published back in those days. Shot people's eyes out with those tracer gun plastic
Nice.
discs.
Spock helmet?
Spock helmet. Never had the Spock helmet. That was before my time, unfortunately.
They had a Spock helmet box on the Star Trek cruise this year behind a glass. So I got to see a box behind a glass. Yippee.
Yeah, I've been chasing that one. It's like a holy grail item.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, that was actually released before I had any awareness of Star Trek or the toys that came with it.
Understood.
So I missed it. I came in with the Mego wave back in the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, but as far as my writing, I was a big fan of the books that they were publishing from the different publishers, including Pocket Books, which had already been doing it for almost 20 years at that point. I entered the very first Star Trek Strange New Worlds writing contest that they sponsored for new unpublished writers, and was one of the 18 writers they selected that first year.
Nice.
Was able to repeat that for the second and third contests, by which point I had eliminated myself from eligibility because now I'm a professional writer, he says with the air quotes. And so the editor at the time, John Ordover, who had been shepherding that contest, offered me a Star Trek novel contract. And I had never written anything longer than a short story to that point. So, of course, I said yes.
Sure.
By the way, for anybody listening with aspirations of being a writer, whenever you're offered a gig, you say yes.
Yeah, right.
And then you figure out how to do it.
Right.
So I did that. That came out in 2002. I actually got the contract in 2000. I've been writing for Simon and Schuster pretty much ever since.
Wow.
Wow.
Awesome. Cool. Peter.
Okay, so when it comes to writing a novel, everyone's got their own process. Is there one that you tend to stick to, or does it vary depending on what kind of story you're doing, or which world you're working in? Because I know that some people like start with outlines, some people just kind of let it go, or everyone's got their own thing. How does it work for you?
Well, when it comes to Star Trek and tie-ins in particular, so any novel based on a movie or TV show or a video game or whatever, there's always an outline. You submit your idea as an outline to the editor, who in turn gives that to the property owner. So in this case, it's Paramount. They have a group of people who vet all this stuff, and they go back and they may give notes, they may ask for revisions, they may not like it at all. And then once that is all finalized and the author's given a green light, that's when the actual writing of the book starts. And once you're done with the manuscript, then we go through the whole approval process again. The editor does the editor thing, marks it up, throws it back at you, tells you what an idiot you are, that kind of thing, and you work out all those problems. And then when they're happy, they send it to to the property owner, and again Paramount, who also weighs in on it. And they're basically just making sure that the brand is being properly represented. We're not violating anything that's on the screen, canon, that kind of thing. Not doing anything ridiculous with the characters. I've been working with the folks, and it's literally the same group of people this entire time, the same 3 or 4 people, and so we've got an established rapport. They know me, I know them, I know what they expect, I know what they're not going to put up with. I tend to get through the review process pretty painlessly, just like the other seasoned writers, that have been doing it for a while. So depending on the property owner, it can be a little more touch and go. But with Star Trek, we're blessed with a group of people who really care about the property and really know the property, and it's really hard to get anything over on them. Like even the arcane references they'll get,
Whoa.
they're pretty hardcore. So and then once all that's done, I get paid, and the world is never the same again. Yada yada yada. The book goes on sale.
Right.
So, and then I start. If I'm lucky, I get to do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have been for the last almost 25 years, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I've had a good run so far.
Yeah. I love it. I love
I'm
it.
having
Where
every
do you,
fun.
where do you come up with like with the ideas for the stories? Do like you just like brainstorm a bunch? Do you like is it from conversations? Like how does that part of it work?
It varies from book to book. Sometimes it'll be as simple as, "Hey, Dayton, we need a next generation novel for next year. What do you got?" and,
Nice.
then, and then they send me off, and I come up with a couple of ideas. Or I don't come up with a couple of ideas. I might toss around a couple of ideas myself, or with my writing partner, my sometimes writing partner Kevin Dillmore, and then we pick the one we like the best, and we work it out to a point where we can pitch it to them, and they decide if they like it or not. If they like it, they tell us to go back and do a proper outline, which is about 15 to 20 pages. It's like a 15 to 20 page synopsis of what the book's going to be.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's that simple. It's that straightforward. Other times they call because they are putting together some sort of larger project, like multiple books, miniseries, 3 or 4 book event, some kind of crossover thing. And they put their team of writers together, and we get on a call or a series of calls, and we hash out the big story, and then who's going to tackle which group of characters with, which parts of the plot, how are they going to intersect, how are we going to hand off the baton, who's going to bat clean up, who's going to be the leadoff hitter, that kind of thing. And then we all go to our corners and we write, and the editor, is basically herding cats for 6 to 12 months while we all write our books.
Yeah.
And it all gets pieced together. And, at the end, we have a mini series event or some sort of multi-book event. So when we go to our corners, we've all figured out that, writer A is going to do this, writer B is going to do that. And we exchange our outlines back and forth, however many times it takes for everything to get in a row before we all go to our corners and write. That's usually my favorite part of the process, is the brainstorming and the idea swapping. And it's like, playing poker and throwing chips and cards in the middle of the table.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that, you it's like, or what is it? Go fish or something. You're tossing your discards and they're picking them up. We're like, I like that piece, or you're a good fit for that plot point or that storyline or those aliens or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. I mean, to me, that's my favorite part. Then, the most boring part is probably sitting in front of the computer going, what the hell do I do now?
Yep.
Oh man. I love following you on social media. Like you and I tend to interact a bit, and we have very much a lot of the same sensibilities and humor and stuff. And you do talk a lot about your 11-year career in the United States Marine Corps. I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. My late grandfather was a Marine in the South Pacific in World War II, and hearing those stories, which I did not long before he passed away, were staggering. How do you think being a serviceman has influenced your writing, in particular thinking about Star Trek, which is in a lot of ways kind of military sci-fi?
I like to think it helps me bring a certain level of realism to those dynamics that fit into the Star Trek mold. So, like, the chains of command and proper procedures and protocols, and then if we get into things like tactics and strategy for battles, I hope it helps there too. But I just I have a feel for that life, like that culture of order and discipline, but not a civilian workplace. When I write military fiction, military science fiction, I tend to focus on those types of situations, but I tend to do it from the lowest level possible, or a lower level, like the day-to-day ins and outs of the rank and file, not the high concepts, stuff that the generals are doing in some room somewhere.
Right.
The war is just an abstraction on the wall. I like to get into the into the meat of it all, and I like those relationships. And it's not even the big stuff that you think of when you think of a military story. It's just the ins and outs, the day to day, the little 99-cent things that evoke that culture, that feels authentic, like how you talk to each other and how you give each other crap, and and how you pull pranks on each other, and how you chew people out when they screw up, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like to think that lends a little bit of realism to those types of stories.
Yeah.
The feigned sternness before the joke cracks out.
Exactly.
So,
or the gallows humor, the way we, it's like, if it ain't raining, we ain't training. What a great day,
Yep.
Another glorious day in the Corps, you know, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Here
That
comes
was
the big, you know, here comes the
I-
big green weenie one more time, that kind of thing.
another glorious day in the Corps. It's my favorite. One of the greatest lines early in Aliens, which is of course again a way that I got exposed to the Marines when I was a kid, because the movie came out when I was 10.
Well, that
So
guy, that actor, the guy that played that Master
oh
Sergeant
yeah,
Capone, he was a Marine in Vietnam, so
yeah,
he lent that authenticity, you know, to
Mhm.
that character, that person, that senior NCO who barks orders and chews cigars and kicks everybody's butt. You know, that's a real Marine doing that. So
yeah. And the same thing with well, thinking about Full Metal Jacket and Arlie Ermy. Oh my God. And then Vincent D'Onofrio, who is of course now Kingpin in Daredevil, which I was talking about a minute ago. So yeah, seeing that real life, not that things ended well for either one of those characters, but still.
I'd been in about 2 years when that movie came out,
Oh,
and I laughed so hard at those boot camp scenes. They depicted a different era. They were, you know,
mhm,
the boot camp you see in the film is not the boot camp I went through, because they were
Yeah.
not allowed to physically harm us.
right, of course.
They were not allowed to do that, and they in theory weren't supposed to curse at us, but that was more of a guideline than an actual rule,
Like the
as they
Pirates Code.
say in Pirates Code.
Yep.
And so, but it's funny because they could get in your face and use words like freaking, flipping, fracking, frapping, and it would still sound just as bad as the other words. You
Right.
know, especially when they're getting yelled at you by three people from three different directions simultaneously, overlapping in quadraphonic sound or whatever.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if
Tearing
you're
you down and
saying
building you back up again. The
and
Marine Corps
if you're saying
deal.
yes to that guy, it's the wrong answer for these guys. You know,
Yeah.
so it's all a big calculated just torment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh
That'll-
my gosh.
Yep.
Wild stuff. Peter.
All right. So getting into this specific book just a touch. So while I was reading it, I did notice very much that the characters felt and or sounded very much like them. So how do you go about getting that character's voice while you're writing them, especially in something like this where you have a lot of different like well-known characters who have a lot of well-known like ways of speaking and quirks and stuff to deal with. So
Well, for characters like Picard and Crusher, who've been with us now for almost 40 years, it's kind of like writing for the original show. It's like I know
yeah,
those characters, I know their cadence and how they speak, and do they use, like, Spock doesn't use contractions, but Kirk does, depending on the situation, or you can there's quirks to
mhm,
their verbal delivery depending on the situation that you just kind of learn. The same thing with Picard. Picard is very distinct and very direct and very precise in his language,
yep,
but not to the point like Data, where Data is very, you know, his diction is absolutely on point and correct. But Picard has that sophisticated delivery, that very confident command authority delivery especially when he's pissed off about something
yeah,
that he delivers, or if he's just, you know, if he's wound up. So you just learn, just it comes from just watching the show over and over and over again. I mean, it's not like it was homework when
yeah,
I first started doing it. I'm like, well, I know how to read this. I know how to write this guy. I've been listening to him talk for 30 years. So it's a little harder with the characters that you don't know so well, that are a little newer, like Rafi,
yep,
who that was my first time writing for Rafi, and some of the and Seven of Nine for that matter.
hmm,
So those are more of an acquired. I went back and I watched the episodes, and particularly the Picard version of Seven of Nine,
yep,
to get a feel for her more relaxed, human delivery of her
yep.
dialogue versus her more formal diction from Voyager.
Yeah, which,
Right.
as a little bit of a spoiler, there was a moment where I could see the switch between the two in the book,
Okay,
which I thought
yeah,
was
not to,
neat.
don't spoil anything. But anyway,
Shh. Yeah.
so yeah, it just comes from, just doing your homework. In this case, the homework is, God, I got to watch Star Trek again. Okay,
Oh my God.
you
It's
know.
terrible. We have to do it too. And we have a bi-weekly show where we really focus on talking about episodes. So we always have homework, whether it's a deep dive in a single episode or if we're summarizing a few. So yes, a lot of watching and note taking. So we do it for Star Wars as well. So we have a show that does that. But anyway, so question. Trek Sophie's choice of types. What is your favorite show to write for, favorite character, and what's the most difficult on the flip side of that?
If I'm given if they call me and say, "Hey Ward, we need a Trek novel from you for next year," and they don't give me any other directions, I will almost always try to come up with an original series idea.
Makes sense.
That's just when you say the word Star Trek, that's the first one I think of. That's the one I grew up with. That's still my all time favorite.
Mhm.
As far as characters that are like to write for, I tend to lean toward the authority figures, so Kirk and Picard, Spock, but Michael Burnham as well, because I've written a couple of I've written a Discovery novel with her as the captain.
Right.
But I also wrote one of the early Discovery novels where I got to write Giorgio and Lorca.
Oh, I have that book.
And, and I have the distinction of writing the only Discovery story with the actual Prime Universe Lorca.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh.
I might have that one on audiobook, which is why I'm potentially not remembering it as sharply. And it was a few years ago, so only so much room in the head to remember. But I remember enjoying I definitely remember enjoying what I read. Yeah.
And as far as hard to write or difficulty to write, I sometimes struggle with like Klingon characters, not Worf, but like actual honest to God Klingon characters, if they're the bad guy in a particular story or they're the adversary, because you want to get it all right as far as, the honor and the courage and the bluster and all that, and not make it sound like a cartoon.
Right.
And you want to make sure that you do it correctly. I mean, I do that with all the characters, but sometimes I struggle with those guys, depending on if it's a character we've created for the story or if it's a character that we've used or seen before or somebody else created and I get to use them in my book.
It's like with Klingons, if you're making your own Klingon, it might be a little bit more difficult than if you were to say have to write like Gowron or Martok or
right.
something. Like
Gowron. I've written Martok briefly, and he's a fun one to write because he's just sort of like he's kind of a rebel from within the Empire. So
kind of a loose cannon,
loose cannon. So you can have a little more fun with him. Gowron is of course a scoundrel, and thank God he's dead. But and then Worf, of course, is his own unique challenge because he's sort of that walker between worlds with his Klingon heritage, but his human upbringing,
right?
Which is the fun part of any of those characters. Like any of those characters have sort of a duality to them, like Worf or Spock, or they're the ones that it can be most interesting. Because depending on the situation, I can draw on those aspects of their character.
Yeah. Gotcha. My goodness, we've got a couple more questions about.
Keep going. I'm here.
Oh, this has gone fast. So the book out at the end of it, we're talking in April of 2026. Comes out on April 28th. What else have you got going on this year? What's the next big project? Is there anything that you can tell us about before we get into talk about the book a little bit more?
I've got about 4 short stories to write between now and the end of July, which sounded like it would be a nice, easy spring and early summer. But just yesterday, I talked with an editor for a publisher with whom I have not previously worked, and they have offered me a novel contract, but they also want it by the end of July.
Oh my gosh, what?
So my calendar just went from 0 to 60, and so when we get off here, I need to go back to writing. No, not that bad, but I mean, it's just like, the first thing I did after the phone call was I always put together a calendar of like, this is my start date. This is where I want to be when I end. And then, I figure out I got to do this many words per day, to get to that mark, and then leave myself a cushion for editing and all that. And I'm like, I'm going to be working a lot of weekends this summer.
Oh my goodness.
But it's an opportunity that I can't say anything about it yet because that hasn't been announced, but it's like, and it's it's a property and it's a tie-in, but it's a property and a publisher with whom I've not previously worked.
Oh, that's exciting.
And it's an interesting, it was one of those gigs where I'm like, I really can't say no. I really want to do this. So I just explained to my wife and kid, don't look for me this spring. We'll talk in August.
Right. And you're at Shore Leave in Pennsylvania in July. I know we were talking about that a little while ago. Yeah. What's that event like?
So it's a smaller con. It's more of it's not a creation con or a corporate convention that you see like Comic-Con. It's not a big blowout with tens of thousands of people. It probably gets anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 people on an average weekend. That's the entire weekend tickets sold. And so they've been doing this this will be what, 45, 46, 47 years.
Right.
I've lost track.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
So it's a small con run by a very small group of people with a ton of volunteers who show up every year, and they bring in a lot of guests from different media. Used to be largely a Star Trek con, but they've expanded, over the last 20 years or so. They brought in other properties and other programs and other franchises. Of course, this year the focus will be, they'll have a lot of Star Trek focus because it's the 60th anniversary.
Yeah, right.
But it's also they have a very large writer track, cosplay track, role game or gaming track. And it's probably the one place you'll find the largest number of those of us who particularly specialize in Star Trek fiction,
Yeah.
and comics and games and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of the few times during the year I get to see all my friends on the East Coast,
Yeah.
and a couple that come in from the Midwest, and it'll be fun. We'll do our panels during the day. We'll hang out for a meal in the early evening, and then we'll probably close down the hotel bar. That's a pretty much tradition. And then when they
Nice.
kick us out of the bar, we'll go find something else to eat. And then we'll do it all over again the next day. So.
Awesome. Gotcha. Well, and I have a link for tickets for people who want to come check that out. But that's my bit. Peter had another thought about non-spoilery question about the book, and then we can kind of wrap
Trying
things
to
up.
be non-spoilery. So one of the things that I quite enjoyed about this novel was that, and this is on the cover, so not really a spoiler. His face is there on the front. That you bring Wesley back into play.
Yeah, he shows up a little bit.
Yeah. And so I liked how you brought him in, and then there's references to Prodigy, which I thought were really neat. So I've always wanted to see more about Wesley after his departure at Journey's End and how things kind of panned out there. So how did that idea come to fruition? Like where did that come from?
So the funny thing about this book is it actually represents the second story that I pitched to Paramount as a post-Picard storyline. They originally asked me for a story that would be the first mission of the Enterprise G under Captain Seven. And I said, okay. And this is back, so this is almost 2 years ago now. So this is back when there's still, a lot of talk about, is there going to be a legacy series? Is there not going to be a legacy series? We don't know. We hope we know, and all that kind of thing. And so I was given the task of artfully threading a needle where I could have a story involving those characters, but not get too far ahead of where they might pick up the ball if there is a legacy series. So I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds easy, And so I wrote an outline that conformed to those requirements. I thought it was kind of fun. My editor liked it. Licensing liked it. They pitched it to Secret Hideout, and Secret Hideout said, no, we're not really sure if we're going to do a legacy series. So let's hold off on this. And I'm like, oh, great. I've got a perfectly good outline for a perfectly good story. That's not going to go anywhere. I'll put that in the drawer and use it again. So then I drafted another one. And to be honest, this one is based on an idea that I pitched kind of flippantly a few years ago, when I said, hey, they've decided to marry up the Travelers and the people who gave us Gary 7.
Right.
And I'd already done some books with Gary 7. And of course, we'd done the Coda trilogy that involves Wesley to a very great extent. And I'm like, I would really like to play in this space where we marry these two things together, because they're not doing anything with them on the show.
No.
So that's where this story started, was my wishing to play with those pieces, those toys from the box again. If you're reading, I don't think this is going to be too much of a spoiler. Anybody who knows me knows this is going to be true. If you're reading the book and you feel like you may have met this version of Wesley before, go with that feeling. Like if you think you may have read a version of him slightly afield, from the Coda books, go with that feeling. That was intentional. He's also based probably in equal parts on. He's definitely based in equal parts on his portrayal from Prodigy. Like if you read the descriptions of where he's at, that's from the episodes, the ziggurat
and his clothing.
And his clothing, which honestly, to be fair though, we had that idea in the Coda books before Prodigy showed up.
Okay. No, Prodigy stole the sweater.
Not the sweater, but like the dark pants and the field jacket and all that kind of stuff. That
kind of looking like a Doctor Who kind of like a recruit.
Well, it's funny because when we first came up with the idea of using Old Man Wesley in the Coda books, I was very much inspired by the War Doctor from Doctor Who.
Yep.
So
that tracks.
And so there are some things that he does and some things that he says that will, if you're a sly reader and you're familiar with the books, hopefully, and you're hoping for a Coda reference on the down low, you will hopefully be rewarded.
Ooh, now I'm gonna have to dig in. I'm trying to be better about reading, because I get too focused on like, oh, there's all this stuff on TV and stuff we talk about on the podcast, but I'm trying to shut down and actually read for at least an hour a night. I'm really trying. But having this book has kind of pushed me in that right direction, and I've got some of your other books laying around that I've got to dig into. So I'm inspired, so thank you.
Thank you.
Not only for that, but thank you for being here. Defy Fate again comes out April 28th here in 2026, and people can come check you out. There you go.
There it
People
is.
can come check you out at Shore Leave July 10, 11, and 12 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, if I'm remembering
That is
correctly.
correct. That is correct.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you for being here. This has been totally awesome. Listeners, please pop on over to secretfriendsunite.com. We have nearly 100 great interviews like this that we would love to have you enjoy, and on our YouTube channel as well. And just like our guest tonight, Dayton Ward, thank you so much, man.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.